Hey, Ben.
Yes, David?
You know what we're talking about today?
I have no idea, but I know this guy does.
I'm Kevin, and we're talking about middle school ministry.
So what he's really saying is teaching students how to put on deodorant.
Yeah.
No. What he's really talking about is how to play games with kids.
Not exactly.
Okay, maybe how to have one-sided conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
You mean teaching kids about puberty?
That's middle school ministry.
Instant romance. Instant romance.
Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out Youth Ministry TV, brought to you by the Youth Ministry blog. Today we are with our resident middle school ministry genius, Kevin Libick.
Yay, Kevin!
Kevin, so give us a little bit of insight to yourself, where you're working, and how long you've been.
So this is a small thing. My last name actually is Libick.
Libick. How long have I said Libick?
Man.
I don't know if I've ever heard you say my last name.
Okay.
So
Kevin. I'm so sorry, bro.
Libick.
yes.
You
I'm
know,
used to it.
Libick is better than Libick, because Libick almost sounds like Lubbock.
And Lubbock
There's
is-
nothing wrong
There's
with
nothing
If
good
you,
about.
if you live in Lubbock, I love you. It's all good. But
Speaking of middle
Lubbock.
school, my nickname in middle school by my football coach was Lubbock.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So
It's all coming full
It's
circle.
all
Okay,
coming
Okay,
full
real
circle.
fast. Your like nickname by your coaches was Lubbock. What was your nickname by your coaches? Because you
Coaches was
wrestled.
hands, because
Hands?
I always like my hands when I wasn't supposed to. So.
I'm glad you explained that. That could go bad. It's right.
They would really handsy.
That's real bad. That's real bad. All right, bringing this back in. Kevin, tell us about yourself.
So I am a middle school pastor at Fort Worth, Texas, and I've been doing middle school ministry for about 15 years, so longer than most of my students have been alive.
That's crazy.
That's a long tenure too. 15 years.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, but I love it. I love it a lot. The first group of middle schoolers I ever started working with, those guys are now married in their 20s. They've got careers and all that kind of stuff, so it's fun.
That is very cool.
That's crazy. All right, well, we brought Kevin in because to be honest, we always want to be honest with you guys, and we both tend toward,
Wait, we do?
most of the time we're honest with you guys, we both tend toward ministry with older students, yet we are still in charge of 6th through 12th grade. And so we like to bring in people who are wiser than we are, who specialize in specifically junior high, middle school ministry.
I don't.
So,
Wise
experts.
is not a word that I would. Expert, nah. I've just been doing this for a long time. I wouldn't
That
consider
makes you
myself
an expert.
An
Yeah.
expert.
Yeah. You are a master bricklayer, and we are just novice bricklayers when it comes to junior high.
How did we get on to masonry?
You know, I listened recently to a sermon by Vodi Baca when he was talking about bricklayers. I don't know why that just came out.
Well,
There you go. Check that one out.
there you go. There you go. All right, so Kevin, why middle school ministry? Why is a program specifically designed for anywhere from 6th to 8th grade, 5th to 7th grade? Why is a program specifically geared toward junior high students important?
Well, I think for me, the first part about that is why did I get into middle school ministry? Because knowing that I was wanting to go into student ministry, I think I always tended to think, yeah, you're going to go into high school ministry, because that's where kind of I thought I was going. And I did an internship during the summer at a church, and they put me with middle schoolers, and I fell in love with it. And I realized that really for most people, they don't fully appreciate what's going on in middle school ministry and in middle schoolers themselves. So I got into it because I fell in love with it. And I think for most people, that's what they realize. It's a special tribe. We really do consider ourselves a tribe. There's people out there, it's like we have our own little handshakes and that kind of stuff. Not really, but
I was about to say, I was like, I need to learn this
I was
handshake
going to
now.
say, you got to demonstrate.
No,
Give it
handshake.
away on camera so that everybody feels
Yeah,
it.
and then I was going to want to develop our own.
But I think ultimately what it comes down to is middle schoolers are in the most unique time of life. And I've never met a person who says, I want to go back to middle school. That year was awesome. No one ever says, middle school is so amazing, I want to go back. And everyone who is in middle school ministry I know that is effective, it's because they look back at that time frame and they realize it is so difficult, but yet so pivotal. developmentally, middle schoolers are going through the most amount of change, physically, emotionally, socially, as they've been since they were like 2-year-olds.
Yeah.
And so it is to me, it's just strategic.
Yeah.
They're starting to develop all sorts of skills, and they're changing, and I want to be a part of what God is doing in the midst of those changes.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so your ideal middle school ministry, what would that look like? What age would that begin, or what grade would that begin and extend to?
So you're talking young teens, early teens, and that really varies church to church. Okay. I know a lot of churches that have 5th and 6th grade up into 8th grade. I know some churches that are 6th grade through 8th grade, and our church happens to be 7th and 8th grade, but it's in that time frame. It really is it's dependent on the context that you're in and the culture of. But I would say 5th, generally 6th to 8th grade is considered middle school ministry, young teen ministry.
That's awesome.
Earlier when we were talking, you were saying like one of the things that's hard about that is the transitional period, right?
Yeah.
Because you only get them for 2 years.
Yeah.
So what do you find challenging about that? I mean, obviously the time limit, right? And you've got to try to mold and shape. But in terms of like continuing relationships,
I think that's the hardest part. Is middle school ministry is a ministry where you're not necessarily seeing fruit immediately. And so too many people I know get started in middle school ministry or get involved, and they don't stick around long enough to see the fruit, to see where your ministry is paid out. And so for me, that's the hardest part, is sticking around long enough to where you start to see them in later years of high school coming back and going, hey, I remember when you taught me this, or I remember this aspect of your ministry. So for me, that's one of the hardest parts. Two, for me, it's turnover, just the rapid turnover. We have 2 years, so every year 50% of my group is turning over.
Wow.
So trying to maintain tradition, trying to maintain continuity it's hard, it's difficult. Yeah.
And so what constitutes a good, and this might be a really broad question, but what constitutes a good junior high or middle school pastor? Like what kind of attitude, personality, et cetera, do you need to have to excel with that age demographic?
I think number one is you got to like them. Middle schooler, seriously, that is the number one thing, because middle school, they can sniff out, they walk around with the distinct impression that every adult thinks they're awkward, weird, squirrely, can't stand them. That's just the impression that they get from their teachers.
Somehow they can sniff that out, but they can't smell themselves.
No.
Is that what you're saying? Like,
It's all too well.
they have like this sixth sense, but they don't have their normal.
Right, yeah.
Their normal faculties aren't operating at full capacity.
And the great thing, what I love about middle school ministry as opposed to high school ministry, and I did high school ministry for 3 years, but is middle school ministry, if they know that you like them and that you appreciate them, they are your friend from day one. You do not have to work as hard to earn the right to be heard for a middle schooler as you do for a high schooler.
Yeah.
And so, number one, you got to like them. And you just can't take yourself too seriously. You know, bald guy, I can't get tired of the bald jokes ever.
hey, I'm 5'4" and a half, 5'5" on a good day, so the junior hires just really resonate with me. They're like, I'm taller than you, because they're going through puberty.
Yeah.
And so literally every Sunday they grow like an inch and I'm not.
Totally.
And so they come and point it out. So,
Yeah.
When they're making fun of your bald head, do you ever point them to Elisha and how he was all like?
Oh, that's on our yearly teaching rotation every single day.
When you make fun of bald people, you'll get mauled by a bear. Okay.
So I think effective middle school pastor, you got to like them, and they got to know that you like them. Two is you've got to see the potential in them. There's a phrase that goes around when you talk about middle schoolers, and I've heard this sadly too often, even in leaders in the church, where the phrase middle schoolers are pre-people.
Oh yeah, I've heard that phrase.
Yeah, pre-people, and that just, makes me want to punch them.
That's not cool.
Because it's like, oh, okay, yeah, kids are people, but middle schoolers are not. And the assumption is that they're not fully developed yet.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's a slap in the face of God, who created those people in the image of himself, but understanding they're going through real life issues. It just looks differently, and they have fully developed personalities, dreams, hopes, and talents. We have, just this past Sunday, we had a girl in our worship team. Our worship team is completely filled with students.
Yeah.
And we had a girl who wrote a song, completely a worship song, and our band performed that song, and it was amazing. It was deep theologically. It was catchy. It was a mature thing. And I think if you see middle schoolers and you can't see the potential of them and believe them and want them to push greater beyond where they're at, they love when an adult just says, I see something in you, and I want to see you develop that even more.
And I've noticed that because when I first got to my current context, my heart was for the high schools and the junior highs and how we're going to reach them. And so I came here preaching, hey, we're going to reach your schools. You're the pastors, you're the preachers, you're the missionaries to your schools. And it's like, I want you to go and start a Bible study in your school.
Yeah.
And I preached this to everyone, 6th through 12th grade. And the people who responded were the junior high students. Like my high schoolers were like, hey, we're too cool. That's going to kind of be difficult. But my junior highs were the ones who were like, oh, wow, there's vision. Yeah, I do have the ability to do that, and I'm going to do it. They started in 8th grade. It's just excelled through high school now. But it was the junior highers who latched on and did that.
Yeah. And so I think you got to believe in them. Now, you have to be understanding, okay, what does that actually mean? Does that mean that they're going to be able to have as mature or developed abilities or faith as maybe an older high schooler? No, it's going to look different.
Yeah.
But they want that challenge. They want somebody to believe in them. They want someone to equip them. And when you do that, along with the you're not a nuisance to me, that attitude, kind of the rest of your ministry falls into place.
Yeah, which that's great. Leads me to this next question of what do you see as the biggest differences between a junior high ministry and a high school ministry? Like what does a junior high program or personnel need to focus on that maybe the high school realm wouldn't need to?
I think in student ministry in general, but middle school ministry in particular, you've got to be focused on the basics. Focus on the basics over and over again. They need to know the content of the gospel. They need to know why they believe what they believe. That's what's happening in middle school. They're starting to develop abstract thought. They're starting to say, I believe this, but do I believe it because my parents believe it or because I really believe it?
Own it, yeah.
I look at it, my illustration that I give to parents is like middle school ministry is like a backpack. And all through children's ministry, they've been getting these, the papers from the Sunday school.
I was going to say, coloring sheets? Like
Right, the coloring sheets of, Bible passages and stories, and they just shove it in their backpack. And in middle school ministry is where we start to open up the backpack, pull out the sheets, and say, okay, how do these fit together?
Yeah. Wow, that's good.
And so we want to keep the main thing the main thing. What is the content of the gospel? How do you share your faith? And so it's a lot of equipping. It's a lot of focusing on those main things.
That's really good.
So with all those like challenges where there's this body and mind, this biological development going on, and this you only having them for 2 years, and like you said, you having to equip them to take things out of their backpack and put them together so they get a bigger picture of the gospel. How do you build that sustaining culture? Because you talked about like, hey, we're battling to keep tradition there, and you're graduating out people every 2 years. So how do you institute that culture amongst your leaders and then also amongst your students?
For me, part of it is just longevity of leadership is always a big part. Yeah. The great part about having students for only 2 years is you can recycle programs a whole lot easier, and they don't because they don't know.
That's genius,
right?
Yeah,
we've all had that event that's like, I don't want to do this every year for 4 years. Those kids get well in middle school ministry, they don't get that tired of it.
Everything's fresh.
Yeah, everything's fresh all the time except for the body odor. That's not fresh. So I think that is a big part of it. For me, we celebrate our students. We celebrate who they are, and we have traditions. And like one of our traditions is every May we do kind of like a blessing ceremony for our 8th graders that our 7th graders get to take part of. Like they pray over our 8th graders, and so as 7th graders they're seeing what's going on as 8th graders.
What do you think the benefit of that tradition is?
I want to create an environment where our middle schoolers are excited about moving on to high school. I do not want to create students who are dependent on the middle school ministry experience.
They latch onto you and they're like, it's safe here. I feel welcome.
So we
here.
include we include our high school ministry in that Sunday, and we want them to say like,
cool.
hey, we're celebrating you, we're blessing you, we're so excited about God's new adventure in your life, and it's good that you're going to grow up because that's what we want them to do. We want them to grow up. We don't want them to stay middle schoolers forever.
Yeah, that's great. That's really good. And so where would you say that currently, and you're probably going to be preaching to us right now, where do you most youth ministries miss it when it pertains to middle school ministry. If you're going to say, hey, if there's one thing you need to be doing for your junior high students, this is it. Now that's kind of put you on the spot.
Yeah,
right?
one thing. I haven't got a chance to really kind of hit on this idea of creating a safe place. I think student ministry in general needs to create a safe place, but middle schoolers are so awkward, so I don't want to say involved, but focused, where they believe that everybody is looking at them on screen, evaluating them.
Self-conscious, right?
Self-conscious, big time. And so to create an environment where it's okay to be a little awkward or weird and to not point it out, to not joke, oh, like, yeah, your voice cracked or whatever, those kind of things.
But to celebrate that, be like, your voice cracked, you're going through puberty.
Right.
Step one. Yeah.
So for me, it's like, creating that environment. I think where most middle schoolers ministries miss it is that idea that I was talking about earlier. It's just potential, and seeing that middle schoolers aren't sitting there and being observers. I talked about we want them to become participants in the ministry and giving them every opportunity they can to put on and try out the different aspects of living out your faith. And doing it in a safe environment. So we talk a lot about giving kids opportunities. If they feel like they want to teach, we'll let them teach.
Wow, that's great.
That's why our worship band is mostly students. We want to give them opportunities where they feel like, okay, I'm trying this on. And I think that's a lot of what middle school ministry is. It's them trying to figure out how God has wired them and shaped them. And so for me, it's belief and saying, okay, let's give middle schoolers opportunities to lead, to engage, to serve, to be a part of something, as opposed to, okay, someday you will get to do these things. So sit down and listen and learn, and someday you'll get to use this information.
Yeah, it's that whole idea that what you're saying is so many people view them as not
Pre-people.
you call them pre-people, but within the church, it's like, well, they're the church of tomorrow.
Right, yeah.
And saying like, no, they're the church of today. They're,
Yeah, totally.
They're followers of Jesus Christ. They are the church.
Yeah.
Right. And so within that idea, have you faced any trouble of selling this idea to your church, to the church? Like, do churches, the institutions, devalue those grades? Does that kind of make sense? And it sounds horrible, right? But have you experienced like other youth pastors sharing that, middle school pastors sharing that, like, wow, our church doesn't just validate this age demographic?
Right. I think yes, that does happen. I've seen that the longer that I've been in middle school ministry, the more that I see that I bring my credibility to the students. And so there's an aspect of, if I want people to believe in the students that I care about, then I better prepare them well. So like if I say we're gonna serve, like with Operation Christmas Child or something, like we're gonna stuff boxes. Well, that means I'm going to make sure that runs smoothly, and put them in opportunities where they are in different areas of the church where where other leaders are saying, oh wow, that middle school ministry, they really are preparing kids and they're getting them ready.
It's almost like the product demonstrates the necessity and what can happen if it's done well.
And I think, in student ministry in general, we always fight the battle of looking the part of stereotype of, oh, they're all messy, they're unorganized, they don't know. But the reality is that's just a reflection on us. And if we're not willing to put forth a good effort of being, I don't want to use the word professional, but professional, of making our ministry excellent, then why would we expect the leaders of the church to see our students in the same way?
Wow, that's amazing.
So give them something to be, I think for me, it's give them something to be proud about.
Give them that ownership and everything else like that.
And our church is great about supporting our ministry and giving us opportunities.
Talking about support, like an essential part of any student ministry is trying to engage the parents, right? We're always having those conversations. So having the 7th and 8th grade on that junior high, that middle school level, how do you engage the parents, and what do you find the struggles to be, and how are you trying to overcome those?
So for sure, for parents, we always use the language of partner with parents. Parents are always partners. I send out a weekly email to parents talking to them. I equip them to help them understand their kids more. But a lot of it is just saying, hey, you're normal and your kid is normal, right? So many times I get parents email me going, hey, my kid's acting like this or they're doing this. Is that okay? Is that normal? And I'm like, it is. And it's okay that he's going through that or she's going through that. So we talk a lot about partnership. We engage them we have a lot of parents who are serving in our ministry. And that's a great thing, is because if you're old, one quote that I always love about middle school ministry is that it says that middle schoolers will naturally gravitate to the oldest person who takes them seriously.
Oh, wow.
I think Wayne Rice said that way back in the day, and it still rings true to me. And so parents, grandparents can serve in that ministry as long as they take them seriously and love them and care for them. And so we always say, parents, you're welcome. We make sure that we are intentional about certain events like we do, on our retreats. We do one specific retreat that talks about dating and relationships, and we include parents writing a letter to them, to their kids, that they read. So we're always thinking about how can we, because we all know this, when they become teenagers, that gap between the connection between parents and kids, if left to itself, just widens and widens and widens. And so we want to make sure that we keep those conversations going.
That's great. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, both with us and with everyone in our community. And so if you guys have any questions for Kevin, make sure that you go on to YouTube and down in the comments below this video, just ask any questions that you have of Kevin, and I'll make him get on there and answer them for you, okay? Make him.
You just got volunteers.
That's right.
That's how it works, right? You just volunteer people. Yeah?
That's how you recruit people. That's how you recruit
You put them on camera and say what they're going to do. And they have to
them
do it.
accountable.
Yeah, there you go. And so if you have any questions for Kevin, definitely leave those in the comments, or go to the youthministryblog.com/middle school. The youthministryblog.com/middle school. And that's where you'll find this, as well as some helpful resources that will help you in middle school ministry. And with that, Kevin, what is the best resources you have found as it pertains to junior high or middle school ministry?
So 2 things. One is a book called Middle School Ministry. Very creative title.
That's
And
straightforward.
it's written by Mark Ostreicher and Scott Rubin. They are the pioneers of middle school ministry and great people.
Absolutely.
If you are at all, even if you're even if you are a volunteer leader, there's no just about that, but even if you are a volunteer leader, there's a tribal gathering every year called the Middle School Ministry Campference. About 150 middle school pastors and volunteers and leaders spend the weekend talking about the unique challenges of our ministry. If you could all be a part of that weekend, I would highly recommend it.
That's awesome, definitely. So youthministryblog.com/middle school, and you'll find, I'll link to both the book and the conference as well. So thank you guys so much for joining us on Youth Ministry TV, brought to you by the Youth Ministry Blog, and we will see you in the next episode.